Okay, so this is the May the 15th meeting, and we've had a report on the visits to collect some samples of gravel from Harrowill Common, not inside the SSSI, but from spoil heaps around the northern side of the common from recent pond digging. And yeah, we've discussed the various problems that there are with the content of the gravel that we've collected, but we're still assuming that it'll be indicative in terms of the content of pebbles, for the actual classed analysis. How we're going to go about counting that would be, the proposal has always been to take those sacks to Brunel University and do it in one of their labs, and that David Bridgeland and Phil Collins would need to be present for that. But Di, I'm going to ask you to just describe very briefly your suggestion for citizen science and for actually counting pebbles on the common as an event.
Well, if we're going to dig somewhere, which was the original intention, we could make it a big event, even if we're digging by hand, and get an army of people digging and a second army of people sieving with water. You'd need water brought on the common, and then a third session where they're laying it out and pebble counting, but it would have to be very controlled, and it would have to be, you know, you'd have the section here, section there, section somewhere else. But you could actually get quite good results. I'm comparing it to the Abbey Wood sieving that they do there, which is less controlled. It's just that if they find anything interesting, they show it to the organisers, and if it's a mammal, the organisers keep it. So it's on the same lines as that, but the council there are extremely cooperative, and they bring the water, and they let the digger go on the land and things like that. So I don't think we quite got the cooperation here, but if we could get it, yeah, that would be good. But if we hand dig it, if there are people with muscle, that if we know where we're digging, we'd have to do a bit of a trial to start with to see if it's really is the right place we want to do it, I think.
Okay, so I'll take that forward. I'll have a look at the Abbey Wood example and see what this might involve. My thinking of having people going and looking for certain types of pebbles is a completely different type of event, and less scientific, obviously, but more fun. And in terms of public engagement, community involvement, might be an interesting thing to try. And Di, you were saying about doing it in Richmond, where you presumably ask them to look for bunter pebbles. And
I asked them to look for anything unusual. These were geologists, so they've recognized flint. So I asked them to pick up anything unusual, and half the class that were picked up were flint. I'd already shown them low green sand chert, and I showed them bunter pebbles, and I'd shown them vein quartz, so that they did have some idea of what the sort of thing I was interested in. And they came back with all those three and something else as well that I'd no idea what it was. But it was fun. They enjoyed it. It's the thing.
Yeah, I have to say that was my thinking was, if it's fun, then probably worth having a go. What else have we discussed today? We spent some time thinking about the River Pinn and the gravels that wash down into the Ruislip area, and that would just be a lovely additional side project, if you like, to write up the River Pinn in a bit more detail and link it to the web page. The other thing this month is that the web page is open, although still under construction, and it's a work in progress, obviously. But call out to anybody watching this video who would like to help with the text, the writing of the text, and any other part of the web page, to please let me know. That would be greatly appreciated. we didn't talk very much about actual testing, apart from that possibility that in the future there might be luminescence testing done by a portable method, that we should maybe follow up on whether that would be a possibility. But we can't do that until such time as we've identified a genuine undisturbed section of Stanmore gravel. Is there anything else I need to record, Peter?
Could I make a point? If we're not allowed to take a digger onto the area, we might as well do it in the SSSI, which is a bit inaccessible for a digger. It's going to be by hand. We could do it.
Sorry, do it by hand, do it by digger in the SSSI, or do it by hand in the SSSI?
If we're not allowed to take a digger in there, collecting a sample from within the SSSI is not as hard as it might have been if we were to take a digger in there. The access would be quite difficult because of all the trees and things.
Until we get permissions for the SSSI, I haven't even considered whether it's by hand or by digger. But if we do get permissions, I'm
sure we will. It's just a bureaucratic process.
Yeah, if we do, then I'm going to ask to take a digger, because, you know, why would they say no if they are giving us permission? There's nothing else happening on that site.
Trees.
Sorry?
Trees. There are a lot of trees.
There are a lot of trees.
I'm not convinced you'd be able to get a digger to where you want it because of fallen trees and other obstacles.
That's
it may depend what time of year you want the digger to go on. It depends when the animals are breeding, I think, you know. Certainly
that's another thing, yeah.
In the Parkwood SSSI, we have to stop work at a certain time when the animals are breeding. So it may depend what month.
March to September, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, to some extent you might want to not do this in the summer anyway, because you want to have, without the leaf growth, you'd be able to see more light.
But and if you're doing it in the autumn, there's a huge amount of leaf cover. I mean, maybe early spring is the thing. When some of that leaf cover is gone.
In the meantime, we're going to carry on planning to look at the banks. The bank on the Harrow Wheel Common side. I think maybe that's the next trip we should do, is to have a group of us going to, I don't know, we've got permission to take shovels and have a look in that bank. And we could maybe just do a little recce to see what are we likely to find, what would the chances be of having a good result if we did get a load of people to dig that bank, just dig a bit of it. Just to clarify, it wasn't difficult to go to the spoil heap and get a load of sacks, just take sackfuls of stuff, and we have permission to do that. So why don't we do that from the bank, from the Harrow Wheel Common side of the bank of the SSSI?
Yes, there's no reason why not. You'd have to get yourself a clean section. And as I say, what worries me there is that if there's any subsequent erosion, that it will almost immediately impinge on the land, beyond the boundary. So you'd have to pick your site very carefully. But yeah, I mean, I would use the same technique.
If it's the same technique, it's not a huge quantity that we're moving.
No.
We've got two separate banks that we can look at. That operation is tiny compared with the idea of a 2 meter wide, 2 meter deep, perfect section that we can look at and investigate for the strategy. That's a completely different operation to me. But if we're not sure about the spoil heap sample, supposing we went to the bank and we took what we consider to be the best patch.
Yeah, we're only seeing the very top of the Stanmore gravel there. So we would actually have to clear some of the talus away.
Yeah.
And basically, the more the better.
Is
Yeah.
it worth doing that before we actually plan the big operation with the digger or the lots of people and the muscle power? Is it worth just going and getting 4 or 5 sacks of gravel so that we've got a second sample to test, or a better sample to test when we go to Brunel and David does his class counting?
Well, yes, I would consider that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a sensible next step.
Liz, you were asking about possible next steps. I'm just, my mum and dad used to help run the Ricelip Northwood and Eastcote Local History Society. I don't know if there are any archaeology societies or equivalents in that area who may well be prepared to take on the challenge of looking at all the historic maps and any archaeological investigations that have happened.
There's a London and Middlesex Archaeological Society, I
Right.
think.
Wonder if they might be prepared with an invitation from the
Lammers.
to actually do that investigation, which might yield all sorts of stuff. Clearly, the growth of the London suburbs would have taken gravels out like there was no tomorrow if it was on the doorstep. And I joked about, the pebble dashing the houses of Pinner, but a lot of them were pebble dashed, and they got the pebbles from somewhere, probably river gravel. But but certainly the roads would have been metalled with that stuff. But I wonder if the archaeology could go away and find the historic record.
Yeah.
I've just been looking at the satellite image of that area, and if you take the fields to the north of the common, there's all sorts of patterns, possible patterns in there. There could be anything, just imagination or some form of variation in soil quality.
I just thought of something, and it was suggested to me by Mark Keller of the Mole Valley that I took out the other day, that you can get the LIDAR from anywhere, and he would be helpful for there. Can we get the LIDAR for that area? I don't know.
I have a feeling we can, yes.
But
Bill
maybe
Collins suggested doing that.
one of you got more savvy than I. I mean, Mark Keller had some software that he could read it and things, but I just wondered if that might be useful, particularly in terms of the earlier question about what height we are at there.
Oh yeah, that would be really interesting as well. I think everybody would be interested to see that.
I'll try and look into that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
What about but that would be through the archaeologists, would it, Alan?
Sorry?
Will you be going through the archaeology groups to do that? Because they'll have access to all of that.
That's right. Well, I belong to Marlow Archaeological Group.
Okay.
So I think there's a link to LIDAR maps.
Yeah.
I've seen.
Interesting, very interesting.
The only other person we haven't spoken to yet, because I haven't really got a specific question, is Prof. Peter Worsley is a friend of mine at Reading Geological Society, and he's worked on gravels in all sorts of places in the Chilterns and also on the glacial history of the borderlands and the rest of it. I'm wondering what he would make of what we already found. I can give him the link to the website and say, have a look at it and see what you think. I'll ask him to do that. I'll see him this evening, so I'll ask him.
Yeah,
please
that'd
do.
be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone, and see you again soon.